Hey guys, welcome back. Today I am going to be showing you a little bit more in-depth look at how we harvest some of our foods that we grow here on the farm. A few of you have been asking what we do with our vegetables. We got an abnormally large amount of spaghetti squash out of our side garden this year, which is great. But then also we need to figure out how we're going to store that so that we get the most out of it. So going to be starting to do more of these videos coming up here as sort of a subset to what we always are doing, which is always ever expanding our farm here at the homestead. So let us know, give it a like, hit that subscribe. Let us know if you like this subset. It's going to be our In the Homestead series. Stick around. Okay, so today I'm going to be showing you how we go ahead and prep the spaghetti squash that we grow in our gardens. We prep the spaghetti squash and we do actually go through the process of cooking it and then letting it sit overnight to drain, because we do end up freezing our spaghetti squash. The main reason that we do freeze it versus putting it and leaving it in a cool, dry, and dark place is that even with storing it in a cool, dry, and dark place, we have noticed that we've had issues with sides or spots on the spaghetti squash going bad, the start of rotting issues. So instead of dealing with all of that, I recently started just going with the freeze method 100% of the time. Now, I do pick them sometimes a little early, especially earlier in the season. I do then let them sit. We have a nice little area here that is introduces a lot of sunlight. And we can set all of our fruits and veggies there. We do the same thing with our tomatoes. We do the same thing with our peppers. We'll let them sit in the light once we've picked them, especially if we do pick them a little early. Let them ripen up a bit. You can do the same thing with spaghetti squash. One here that I do have is a little bit darker, but you can see it is starting to get the area where it's softening. So again, another reason, this is a more recent pick than this one, and we are starting to already see it go on one section of the spaghetti squash. Now, I'm not too concerned with that at this point. Once I cut it open, we'll see if it goes all the way through to the core. The great thing about spaghetti squash is it does have a thick skin and thick lining, and then you're pulling away the actual spaghetti squash once you get inside of it. So you can definitely check to see if it goes all the way through. Sometimes they don't, and if they don't, I still do go ahead and prep the spaghetti squash. So let's get to work. The first thing I always do is I wash off the spaghetti squash. Now, this is not a step that I take when I pick the spaghetti squash. I leave it with any remnants of dirt on it until I am ready to actually prep it or cook it. Cut this one before I cut this one. That way I already know what I have from the two that I know are definitely still good. This one was pretty clean right off the vine. You can't see out there from the angle that the camera's set up at, but looking out into our side garden now, there's just the remnants of most of the things that we grew out there this summer, particularly remnants of squash, not just spaghetti, but zucchini and summer squash and crookneck. But there is also currently three additional squashes growing, and they all look to be doing really well. So I've left them out there just kind of in the garden, but I do plan on picking those today and then letting them, again, ripen up here. So I always cut the top off, that way it creates a flat surface on one side, and then I can take this spaghetti squash tip it again, and then cut down the center that way. It just makes it a little bit easier to handle, especially when you're dealing with these larger size spaghetti squashes. This is on the larger size from what I typically get. I think I had another one that was about the same size as this, but you know, we had a lot that were this size, which is basically what I would equivalent to 2 people eating a serving of spaghetti squash, or some people just like to call it their actual spaghetti because it does simulate spaghetti pasta. So then I'm just going to go right down the center here. Alright, and so you can see in the center here, there's the seeds of the actual plant itself and the guts really. So we're going to go ahead and scoop both of those out. It's actually quite simple to do with spaghetti squash. You're not even going to need a spoon that has sharp edges on it, because this will literally scoop out relatively easily. So unlike, given the time of year, pumpkins where you really have to like get in there and use a sharp object, you can just simply use a spoon, which is what I always use. Alright, that's the first one done. Nice and deep in there. Got the thick edging. We'll scoop this one out. And now they're both scooped out. So what we're going to do with these is, this is what we're going to cook, and this is actually how we're going to cook it. With the skin side down and the opening facing up. I do know folks that actually cook it face down. There's great reasons for either way. This is just the way that I do it because it's the way that I know works well and gets it to where I want to be flavor-wise. Because I do add some things in here. You don't have to, but I do add some things in here, oil and butter, to create a little bit more flavoring into the spaghetti squash as it's coming out. It's really nice to cook it with some butter in these divots here, because it does allow the butter to then kind of soak in throughout the cooking time. But again, folks can do it whichever way they please. So I'm just getting some Pam going. I do spray, even though with this type of skin, more than likely it wouldn't stick. We are using a Ninja Foodie. This is the Ninja Foodie Indoor-Outdoor Grill. We've been using this for a little over a year now. This thing is amazing. We can do fries in here, we can do chicken in here, we can do burgers in here, we can do fish, we can do corn on the cob. I can make breads in here, I can make cakes in here. We can basically do everything in here. Comes with a few attachments, but this is the basic insert. I have cooked numerous full dishes directly into this insert. You can cook right in here. It is non-stick, but again, I do spray it every time I use it just to make sure. And then there's also a grill insert so that you can actually cook indoors as if you're cooking on a grill burgers. Now I will say a little bit different because it is an indoor mechanism, so it's not the flavor profile that you would get from grilling outside, but still really neat item to have. We love it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these and I'm going to lay them both inside the foodie. And I'm going to basically take 2 tablespoons of butter for each. It is a fair amount of butter, but just remember, you will leave a fair amount of it behind after you've cooked it, because you do have to let the spaghetti squash sit in the fridge for at least a 12-hour period, I would say. Overnight is best. So you are going to lose some of that fluid, which is going to include the fluid of the butter that's melted. I'm just using vegetable oil here. Sometimes I use, let's see here, sometimes I use avocado oil. You can use any type of oil you like. I'm going to put these in and have these cook at about 375 for 20 minutes. So you really can use any type of oil, really. You're not going above that 400 mark. Totally up to you. But this is just what I had available and out. I also do put a little bit of salt. This way, the spaghetti squash is now seasoned. So anything to make the step easier and quicker when we take it out of the freezer. So this is one serving, or one night's dinner, so 2 people serving of spaghetti squash that we froze about a week ago. And we went through the same process of cutting it in half, coring it, butter and oil, and then we're now going to cook it at 375. We're going to do the bake function. Just to show you, there's several different options available on this. We're going to set the temp to 375. The time we're going to adjust to 20 minutes. We're going to hit start. It's going to go ahead and preheat. Typically I preheat before I put in the spaghetti squash. There's really no risk of burning spaghetti squash, so I'm not going to worry about it. So what's going to happen is it's going to continue to preheat here. You're going to see this on the screen. Once it gets, these little blinky lights get up to around here, it's then going to beep again. And then it'll say input food or you know, drop in food. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and let that preheat. I'll show you guys what happens when it's ready and preheated and ready for you to put in the food. And then we're going to cook that for 20 minutes at 375. It's telling us to add the food, which we have already done. It's already started. 20 minutes. Okay. Timer just went off. It has been 20 minutes. And so I've got 2 other things here with me now, actually 3. A bowl. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the squashes out of the cooker. Typically I'd put the second squash in, but we're going to let these cool for a minute, give the cooker a break as well. But we're going to pull those out, we're going to put them in here, we're just going to pile them on top of each other because they're very, very, very hot right now. So you do not want to go in there with your bare hands when you do go to take them out of the oven, especially if you're using a Ninja like we are, and it's easy to just flip the lid and scoop them out with your hands. Do not do that. 375 is very hot, so you definitely want to be wearing something, probably. And I also use this as sort of my guide hand. And I use a spatula to kind of scoop it out and in. Like so. And I'm keeping as much as I can, the fluid in there. Because again, we're going to be letting these sit in the refrigerator overnight in a strainer bucket and with a bowl underneath that. That is so that it can continue draining. So even if you're letting the butter, the fluid sit, just remember that's okay. That is how I do it. That's because, again, when we're going and getting ready to store this, we are going to let it drain overnight. So the excess fluid, don't worry about it. If it seems like there's too much, don't worry about it. There probably isn't. It's probably perfectly fine. Just remember you are going to let it sit overnight and strain that fluid out. So what we're going to do now, though, is just in preparation for scooping these out, we're going to let them sit out in this bowl here. I'm probably going to give this another 10 to 15 minutes. These stay hot for quite a long time, unless you feel like wrestling with them with your mitts on or burning your fingers, which I've done plenty of times, believe me, especially when I'm trying to cook these up on a weeknight and I'm not looking to store them and I don't have a lot of time to spend on them. I've done that, and you don't want to do that. It definitely it burns. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to let these sit, let them cool off a little bit. We're going to keep the fluid in them. When we come back, we're going to scoop them out. All you need to do that is a fork. No joke. If you've not ever tried spaghetti squash, the great thing about it is it's literally, this is going to turn into little spaghetti pieces, and you can see a little bit of it now. I'm just showing you just to give you a little peek, especially if you haven't ever had it before, you've never seen it. All you need, a fork. So we'll be back, give this about 10-15 minutes to cool down, then we'll scoop it out and then we'll move on to the next. Alright, it has been just about 10 minutes here. These are still pretty warm, but I can deal with that. I'm just going to move this one out of the way. So essentially what we're going to do is I'm actually going to tip it up on its side here. I try to use the top as like an anchor for myself to hold on to, although this one is going to be a little bit more difficult, so I'm actually going to leave it down here, so I take that back. And then you're literally just going to run your fork through it. But yeah, you just scrape it, scrape it, scrape it. This one looks like it's pretty much done, so I'm actually going to take it and I'm going to put it over here on this because I know it's safe there. And then again, with the second one, same thing. Dump out the liquid and just start scraping. This one actually is going a little bit easier than the other one. And if you do get a little bit of skin in there, it's not a big deal. You're not going to get sick from it. It's just, the skin is tough, so it'll be tough if you do. You might notice it when you're chewing. It might take a couple more chews for you to get it to break down. So now what we're going to do, like I said, is we're actually going to go ahead and get this into a coriander, and we're going to let it sit in the fridge, basically on top of another bowl. That way, as the water comes out, it drops into the bowl instead of making a mess all over the refrigerator. Okay, so like so. This needs to be rinsed out a little bit. So why do we do this step? Every time I tell people how we store spaghetti squash, they ask me why we take this extra step. I don't know if it's considered extra or not. I certainly wouldn't consider it an extra step simply because I think it's a necessary step at this point for us. I think it's a necessary step if you decide, like us, you're going to start storing your spaghetti squash regularly and storing it for long periods of time. Again, you can leave them whole. You can leave them like this. You absolutely can. We just don't take this way very often anymore because, again, when they start to go, they start to go. So if I store them in the freezer, you know, cut them up, cook them, store them in the freezer, I know they'll last 6 months and I don't have to check them every day. That's the other thing. We store potatoes long term. We keep those down in the cellar. Those I check regularly. It would be just another thing that I would need to check regularly. And this is just a great way of just knowing I'm going to have this. It's not going to go bad in this way. So we are literally going to put plastic or tin foil over this. I'm probably going to go tin foil simply because it's much easier to work with. And again, it doesn't have to be pretty. Now, I may check this tonight, and if I see there's a fair amount of liquid in the bowl, I may pull it out tonight. It's around a 12-hour amount of time that I would suggest that you leave it in there for. Again, you don't have to. We just take this extra step because storing it in the freezer this way also, you know, you could run into a little bit of it being mushy. When you store it in the freezer long term, it's already a little bit of a half crunch, half mushy type of food. So storing it long term in the freezer and not allowing it to kind of let the liquid come out of it a little bit, it can be a little bit mushy when you go to take it out and use it from the freezer if you haven't taken the step. But again, totally optional. So this is going to go into our freezer, or our fridge rather. Sorry about that. And then we're going to go ahead and get the second one going and into the cooker, except this time I'm actually going to go ahead and get the cooker preheated. That way, because this is a little bit of a smaller one anyway. So we'll get that preheated and we'll get this in the fridge. Those are what's left of the skins. I'm going to leave these for now. I'm just going to let them cool more before I take them out to the compost. I'm going to keep that bowl readily available though because I'm going to want it again for this. So same process. We already washed it, so I'm not going to wash it again. We're going to cut the head off it enough so that you can have it stand. So it's going to go in the trash or in the compost, and then right down the middle. See the guts there? A little bit smaller this time.